So I think I could live in Luke chapter 8 and Luke chapter 9. If you've been tracking with us, you probably think we have been living in those two chapters. And if you are counting along with me, this would make 12 weeks on Luke 8 and Luke 9. They're long chapters, but they're rich ones, and I trust that you've been getting some good information as well as inspiration from the middle portion of this incredible book, the book of Luke. It's my favorite of the four Gospels. I love the way Luke tells stories. I love the way that he brings phrasing. It's just a tremendous, tremendous book. I love it, and I'm going to do my best tonight to mitigate my use of the words incredible, phenomenal, and tremendous, and I'm out to a tremendous head start on the use of the word tremendous. But let's dive into Luke chapter 9, beginning with verse 21. This is a very tender passage. As you wade through it, there's so much that goes on in Luke chapter 9 that it's very easy to lose this tender moment. It really is a moment where Jesus begins to allow his disciples to see his heart unveiled for them and for humanity. So let's see if we can do this passage justice tonight. Luke chapter 9, beginning with verse 21. The heading is Jesus foretells his death. And as we often like to do, we're in the English Standard Version tonight. You also can track along in your app or with an open copy of Scripture tonight, Luke chapter 9, beginning with verse 21, and we'll go through verse 27 tonight. Jesus foretells his death. He predicts his death with his disciples. Now watch this phrasing already in verse 21. For Jesus is describing something that already happened, and we did this 2 weeks ago regarding Jesus announcing who he is. He asks this question. Peter's the one that answers it. Who do people say that I am? And Peter says, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. Then Jesus follows that up. It's the next reply to that. Verse 21, and he strictly charged and commanded them to tell this to no one, saying this instead, the Son of Man must suffer many things, be rejected by the elders and chief priests and scribes, and be killed, and the third day be raised. So he strictly charges them, entrusts them with it. He really downloads this, and he basically is asking them or requesting of them, if I'm going to give you such heavy, heady material, I need you to hang on to it. It is for your benefit and no one else at this point. I'm going to tell you certain things, and even you probably won't fully understand it, even though you're part of my core. But the crowds that have been pressing in, that have been tracking with us, they're not going to understand. It'll muddy the waters. It'll be incredibly confusing. Well, for me, I think is what Jesus is saying about himself, but especially for those that they might share it with. So he says, I want you to treasure it. I'm going to entrust it to you. And so I charge you or entrust you and command you. It's not even a request. It's not an invitation to hang on to it. You see, there's a strictness to Jesus' communication, a directness, a, dare I say, harshness to how he is communicating. It's extremely clear with his disciples. He doesn't want them to share that he is the Christ, the Son of the living God. Why is it? Well, there's a fourfold Son of Man description. And Luke uses this phrase, Son of Man. In fact, it's an oft used description pre-crucifixion. If you track through the titles or the descriptions, the phrasings regarding Jesus, often, and Luke probably does it the most out of the four gospel writers, often it is the Son of Man, this representation from us, coming out from us. Matthew probably doesn't do it as much because Matthew is trying to establish more the idea of the Messiahship of Jesus, that he is the actual rightful king of the Jews. But Luke is trying to get that across to us even in this mode. He's coming from you. Sense the tenderness, the duality of Jesus as it relates to his divine nature of being fully God, fully the Son of God, and fully human. So he's going to suffer. And so Luke picks it up that it's Jesus saying this about himself. The Son of Man must suffer many things. And can we just cut right to it? The many things are not just physical. Partly is that Jesus is about to go to the cross. We're actually really quickly moving through the ministry of Jesus at this point. We're not too far removed from where Jesus will prepare himself in the Garden of Gethsemane, that he'll pray, right, just in advance of the cross. And in that moment, he asks this question as capillaries are bursting, as blood, sweat, and tears are literally commingling in that prayer. That's a point of suffering as he's asking, Father, if it's possible, take this cup from me. When Jesus would hang on the cross, seemingly moments later from that garden scene, he realizes that he is being forsaken, for the sin of the world is upon him. That's just from an emotional and spiritual standpoint. Then you have the physical aspect, where Jesus didn't do this trade-off where, okay, when pain starts to come, I'm just going to be divine. When I want to show how great I am, then I'll just show the human part of me to show that I'm different than anybody else, but I have skin on. No, that there was a fullness to the divinity, a fullness to the humanity, and it's marked by the idea that Jesus would have a trial that's all night. Could you imagine how arduous that must have been? That he is scorned, he is whipped within an inch of his life. He carries his own cross, the beam covering a rough-hewn back. He hangs and 3 nails go into his hands and feet. A sword goes into his side. He continues to heave for every breath. And he would have suffering of many kinds, that's for sure. Of all different kinds. And so Jesus unveils the moment for his disciples. Come on, have you ever known people that they were privy to when they would die? You ever known people that they knew they would suffer? Imagine how tender that was when you realize the awkwardness of it. Do you have an exchange? Do you speak about it? Do you ignore it? Do you become compassionate, or do you try to wring every moment of life out and you celebrate every breath that you have? How do you deal with it? And Jesus is really showing whether they were trustworthy or not, he's entrusting them with some very delicate, specific, intimate, tender, raw information. And I think sometimes we lose track of this through the narrative flow, that there's a pause that needs to take place here, where even for our own lives, we need to understand that he suffered many things for us. It was a tremendous suffering that he welcomed into his life so that he could take our place. It's an incredible moment of sacrifice. And so I just trust that's not lost on us. I'm not trying to bring any shock value tonight, but I think every once in a while it's important to pause on the suffering Christ, on the suffering Son of Man, that he came as a representative from us, as a perfect lamb slain before the foundations of the world, rejected. And they saw that already in part, where you begin to see with increasing ferocity how the Pharisees wanted to take him out. They had to have been privy to some of that. The idea of being persecuted, him being rejected in his own hometown. But that's only beginning to escalate, where Jesus would soon appear to a crowd that would shout out, crucify, all throughout a night, through 6 kangaroo courts. 3 before the Roman Empire, 3 before the Jewish hierarchy. And he'd be rejected. And the same group of people, probably by and large, would reject him. They'd shout out, crucify, where moments before they had shouted out, Hosanna to the Son of David. Lord, save us. But he'd be rejected. And not just rejected and then he'd go back from whence he came. It would continue to accelerate for Jesus, where he would actually die. He would be killed at the hands of the Romans, at the hands, or I say, of the Jews. It would all be set into motion. And Jesus would be killed. And he announces this to his disciples. And it's one of the most transparent times that he says it with his disciples. Then he says, but it's not the end of the story. We'll be raised to life. It'll all not be hopeless. It'll not be in vain. It will be true. And yet it'll be a surprise ending that Jesus would come back to life again. He predicts it. He predicts not only his death, that's the heading, but he also predicts his resurrection. That he would come back to life again. He would cheat death, hell, and the grave. For otherwise, that death would merely be pageantry. For otherwise, the death would be incomplete. The only way Jesus can declare and say resoundingly over our lives and over all humanity, it is finished, is because he knew that the end of the story would be that death wouldn't have the final word. The finality wasn't death. It would be that at the moment he expires, it sets into motion the rumblings in heaven and the rumblings in hell itself, where Jesus would take back the keys of death, hell, and the grave. And so he would be raised back to life again. And he really casts his pearls before swine here, for they weren't really trustworthy. You'll see the shift in a few moments that would suggest that they still didn't get it. They still didn't fully understand or comprehend, whether it be intellectually, emotionally, or spiritually. They just didn't get it. And yet he declares it anyway. Now watch this flow. And it's partly to get the point across of what we just established, but it's also a setup of sorts where Jesus is using that prior information to now continue to funnel it down. As we continue to watch this flow ensue, Jesus is saying, this is what he will do. He is saying it. I'm willing to suffer. I will be rejected. I will be killed, but I will be raised back to life again. This is the path I am on, and I will do it for you. And he's saying it to his disciples. What will he do? And then what will we do in reply? What will we do? And then it leads to another heading, to take up our cross and follow Jesus. It is a directive over them, but it's also an implication, and it's also an invitation over our lives today. So to take up our cross and to follow Jesus is the heading as it relates to verse 23 then. And he says to all of them, so he shifts his focus now from the disciples, who Peter becomes a spokesperson, but they're all privy to the conversation. Who do you say that I am? You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. The description that Luke says, and it's fascinating how he brings this nuance of Son of Man rather than the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus says, don't even tell anybody about that, but I'll tell you, my inner circle, my core, what will happen to me. Then he speaks to everybody. And it's this clarion call for everyone. And he's giving them an opportunity to move from the crowd to the core. And I want you all to see this is what it really is going to look like over your lives. Are you ready for it? And he's speaking, yes, to his disciples, but he's speaking to all of them that might have ears to hear. So he says to all of them, if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me. If you're going to pursue me, if you're going to be near to me, this is what it's going to look like. You'll deny yourself, but not just once, not just a one-time thing. It'll be a continual self-denial, a continual self-discipline. But if you do, there'll be a delight that will take place. But here's what it'll look like. You will take up your cross, which literally is what Jesus would do. And so Jesus, again, he's still foreshadowing, still predicting his own death, and what they knew to be true culturally in that setting. They saw it all the time. That was the main way that Romans would kill a criminal. It was to crucify them. And what would happen is the vertical beam was already in the ground waiting. They would affix them. In fact, they would have a certain level of permanence to them. And then you would carry your own cross beam, your own horizontal beam. And they would typically be about 120 pounds, how heavy that beam would be. Jesus carries it. And so it's an interesting twist because they don't know that this is the way that he's going to die and that he'll carry his own beam. But he invites them to actually carry their own beam. That he's basically saying, on some level, literally and figuratively, you are going to die for the faith. Are you willing to do that? Will you daily deny yourself, take up your cross, literally and figuratively, and follow me? Not just make a one-time decision, but regardless of whether mountain, valley, or anywhere in between, that you'll continue to follow. Whether you need to cut a straight path, or whether it'll be winding and twists and turns, and it'll change in elevations, will you follow? So then he says this, and he has this series of pithy 4 statements, F-O-R statements, pithy statements. I'm going to do my best to just let them land. I learned as a 7th grader in English class with Mr. Trocca the idea of pithy and concise. And it's still a work in progress for me 35 years later to be pithy and concise. We're going to do our best now. Hopefully I didn't already ruin that with that brief explanation. For whoever would save his life, will lose it. If you're into self-preservation, forget about it. You'll lose it. But whoever loses his life lives with risk, lives with abandon, under the cross, not under pageantry, but unto an aspect of praiseworthiness, of worship unto God, of being a living sacrifice. If you do that, your life will be saved. So you may have to take up your cross. You may find that temporarily you will lose, but in the end, you will gain. Are you ready for this, dear friend? Is what he's saying to not just disciples, not just to the crowd, but also to us now as we still find the incredible resounding voice of the gospel still speaks over our lives today. And then another 4 it leads us to. For what does it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses or forfeits himself? He's saying to them and to us, are you willing to go with the shift of denying temporarily for eternal gain, or will you try to gain everything this world has? And knowing that it'll rust, it'll tarnish, it'll decay, that it will not last. Will you try to get all that you can out of this life? Come on, leader, are you trying to get everything you can out of this life? Come on, those of you that lead your family, what are you sowing? Is it something that is temporary, or is it something that's eternal? Are you living just for this moment, or are you living for legacy? Which way are you going to have? You will not be able to cash it in on both sides. But if you daily take up your cross, if you will abandon so that you will gain, you will find that you will profit by not losing yourself, not losing who you are. You'll not be disingenuous towards yourself. You'll not forfeit. You'll not be disqualified. You will gain that and then some. And then the next 4 statement in verse 26. For whoever's ashamed of me and of my words. Can we just call time out right in the middle of that verse? Come on. Do you have times in your life where you are ashamed to follow him? Maybe you're not really ashamed of him, but you're ashamed of what it has cost you temporarily. Then maybe you begin to compare and contrast, and you know that taking the low road with Jesus has cost you certain aspects of promotion, of acclaim, of reputation. Come on, I feel like somebody can attest to that this evening. And temporarily, if you view that as shameful, then it'll cause you to go back a little bit. You'll renege on your commitment. You'll put the cross down. You'll stop following. You'll pick nets back up again. You'll go back to business as usual. Go back to the way that it was if you're ashamed of him. And come on, can we just call time out for a moment and reevaluate our own lives? If you're in an extended valley, you might find that to follow him is bringing more shame than fame. Come on, if you have an extended valley, you may find that the world is persecuting you. And you wonder if, but come on, if you stay with the entire story, the entire trajectory over your life, the entire pathway that he has called you to, it might get worse before it gets better. But there is something of reward that he is carving out for you. And so, my friends, I dare you not to be ashamed of him, nor the journey that he has you on. There is something of eternal reward, significance, fulfillment that he is weaving into your life. So let's go back to the text. For whoever is ashamed of me and of my words, of him, now watch how he describes himself again. Will the Son of Man be ashamed when he comes in his glory? Come on, they'll be ashamed later on. Will you exchange it? Though there might be a momentary, minor setback for now. But the shame now eclipses the shame for later. So which way will you play it? Which way will you live it out? You won't be able to walk in his glory. There'll be darkness later for your life and for mine if we are ashamed now. He'll then be ashamed. He'll flip the script. When he comes in his glory and the glory of the Father and the holy angels, how many of you know he really is coming for us? So my friends, I dare you to stay with the times of persecution, the times when you wonder if you've lost more than you've gained in the followership after Jesus Christ. You know, one of the things that would help you is to look at those that have run a faithful race before you, those that have gone on to heaven. I think of my Papa John, who every once in a while he would stay. He's my great-grandfather on my maternal grandmother's side. And I remember him staying with us when I was a kid, and in the middle of the night you'd hear him singing old hymns or praying for us by name. He died at 99 years and 7 months. 5 months short of turning 100. And he leaves such a legacy in our family. He cast an incredible shadow, a beautiful one. And he lived his life in such a way that I want to do the same. The legacy that he left for us. And so I look at that. There are times when I might get discouraged. I wonder whether I should, walk in that moment for Jesus or to be quiet, take a step back rather than to step in. And I think of my Papa John. I think of the legacy. I want to be considered worthy of the cost, worthy of the calling that I have received. It motivates me and inspires me to look at his life. Or as Wayne Cordero, the tremendous pastor in Hawaii, says, we need to learn from the divine mentors from the scriptures. Look at how God has rewarded the faithfulness of those, the champions and the heroes of the faith that have gone before us. Well, let's conclude it this way. He has a concluding statement here, 4. It's 4 different 4s that are here. 4, I tell you truly, there's some standing here who will not taste death until they see the kingdom of God. And he's really speaking about 3 different things. One is that the next moment is that Peter, James, and John will be invited to see the transfiguration of Jesus on the Mount. And that time when Jesus' glory is revealed, unveiled in that moment, they'll be privy to it. There's also an aspect of when Jesus will move from crucifixion to resurrection to ascension, that glory. That there will be many of those that will see that. It also speaks to a large audience of us that's included in that audience. Of those that may remain at the coming of the Lord. There'll be some that will not taste death. They'll be called up. They will be raptured. They'll see the blessed hope. Could you imagine if that took place? If you're anything like me over these last 6 months or so, we probably really are rooting for, with greater urgency, with greater frequency, the Spirit and the bride say, come and come quickly. But he is coming for you. And so I dare you not to be ashamed. I dare you not to just try to gain this world. It will pass. I dare you to live in such a way that even if you abandon some of the world, you will gain all of heaven, the kingdom of God, not the kingdoms of this world. And so there might be some of my friends within the sound of my voice tonight. You are growing weary and doing good. You are beginning to take a step back rather than a step in. You started out thinking maybe there'd be a fame in following him, and there's just been some shame. Maybe it hasn't gotten you where you thought it would in this life. But the pathway he's carving out for you is a glorious riches. It's a glorious salvation. It's the glory itself of him being in his actual presence. He can't wait to call you up to be in his presence forevermore. So finish well, my friends, knowing that anything that you leave behind here, God will reward you there. So my friends, hold it loosely and hang on to him tightly. He is the rewarder of your faith. Well, until next time, have a great week, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight. God bless each and every one of you. Ciao.